Welcome to Lena's Romantasy collection. You are about to dive into the Handler's Leash. If you love dystopian romances with major touch her and die energy and terrifying alphas who simp for their handlers, you have found your new obsession. I love seeing how far our pack reaches, so please drop a comment below telling me where you are watching or listening from right now. Before we descend into the vault, make sure to subscribe, turn on the notification bell, and share this video with a friend so you don't miss the rest of the series. Now, grab your mop bucket. We're going to Cell 0. Chapter 1. The Acheron Vault. The Acheron Vault didn't smell like a prison. It smelled like bleach, ozone, and ancient, rotting fear. Elsa dipped her mop into the gray, lukewarm water of the bucket, wringing it out with hands that were raw from the harsh chemicals. She was a Null-class Omega, which, in the hierarchy of the city of Orym, meant she was invisible. She wasn't a citizen, she was part of the infrastructure. Just another scrubber keeping the pipes clean while the feral alphas in the cages screamed their rage at the walls. "Pick up the pace, Null," a guard grunted. His shoulder checked hers hard enough to send her stumbling into the damp concrete wall. Elsa didn't look up. She didn't snarl back. She just steadied her bucket. "Sorry, sir. Slippery floor. Safety first." The guard laughed and kept walking, his heavy boots echoing down the corridor. Elsa waited until he turned the corner before flipping a rude gesture at his back. She checked her wrist comp, a cracked, obsolete piece of tech that tracked her life debt. Current balance, 480,000 credits. Daily wage, 15 credits. She sighed, the sound loud in the oppressive silence of Sector C. At this rate, she would be debt-free in approximately 300 years. Her parents had died, leaving her nothing but this debt and a genetic anomaly. She was an Omega with zero pheromonal response. She was immune to the crippling aura that alphas projected. That was why she worked here. Regular humans couldn't get within 10 feet of a feral alpha before passing out from fear. Elsa just got a headache. She resumed mopping, daydreaming about a sandwich, a real one, with meat that wasn't gray paste. "Elsa Krell," a voice boomed over the intercom. "Report to the Warden's office immediately." Elsa froze. Scrubbers didn't get called to the Warden's office. Scrubbers got fired via text message or arrested by drones. Being called up meant she was in trouble, or worse, she was being reassigned to the incinerator duty. She hid her mop cart in a utility alcove and walked the long labyrinthine corridors to the upper levels. The air got cleaner as she ascended, the lighting shifting from flickering yellow to sterile white. She stood before the heavy oak door of Warden Merrick, took a deep breath, and knocked. "Enter." Merrick was a small man with a big desk and a cruelty that hung off him like cheap cologne. He didn't look up from his datapad. "You're the Null-class scullery maid," he said. It wasn't a question. "Sanitation specialist, sir," she corrected automatically, then winced. "Shut up, Elsa." Merrick looked up, his eyes cold beads. "Sanitation, right. My head of custodial tells me you have the highest tolerance rating in the staff. You cleaned the level 4 riot aftermath without vomiting." "I have a weak sense of smell, sir." "Good," Merrick said. He tossed a black keycard onto the desk. It slid across the polished wood and stopped at her edge. It was marked with a single red 0. Elsa stared at it. The blood drained from her face. "Cell 0?" she whispered. "The janitor assigned to that unit retired early," Merrick said with a thin, nasty smile. "Heart failure. The occupant is messy. Go clean it." "Sir," she stammered, her hands shaken. "Cell 0 houses the Void, Sylas Vane. He's a primordial. I'm just a scrubber. If I go in there—" "If you go in there, you get a 10-credit bonus," Merrick cut her off. "If you refuse, I add a penalty fee to your life debt and throw you in the hole for insubordination." He went back to his screen. "Don't leave streaks, Krell." Chapter 2. The Mop and the Monster. The elevator ride down to the containment level took 5 minutes. It felt like a descent into hell.
Cell 0 wasn't a cage. It was a bunker buried beneath the bedrock. The air here was freezing, and the pressure was immense, a physical weight that pressed against Elsa's eardrums. 2 elite guards stood outside the blast door. They were wearing full mech suits, their visors opaque. When Elsa approached with her mop bucket, they stepped aside quickly as if she were carrying a plague. "You have 20 minutes," one of the guards said, his voice distorted. "Do not make eye contact. Do not speak to it. If he moves, drop to the floor and pray." "Comforting," Elsa muttered. She swiped the black keycard. The blast door hissed, the locks disengaging with a series of heavy thuds. The metal slid open. Inside, it was pitch black. Elsa stepped in, the doors sealing shut behind her with a finality that made her knees weak. She fumbled for the light switch on the wall, but nothing happened. "Great," she whispered. "Budget cuts reach the dungeon, too." She tapped her wrist comp, activating the small flashlight. The beam cut through the darkness, illuminating dust motes and damp stone. The cell was massive, a cavern of reinforced concrete, and in the center, chained to the back wall by shackles thick enough to anchor a battleship, sat the monster, Sylas Vane. He was huge. Even sitting on the floor, his shoulders were broad enough to block out the sun. He was shirtless, his skin a road map of pale scars against obsidian tattoos that seemed to shift in the light. His hair was long, black, and matted, hiding his face. He didn't move. He was like a statue carved from nightmares. Elsa swallowed the lump of terror in her throat. "Just do the job," she told herself. "He hasn't moved in 10 years. He's probably comatose." She dipped her mop into the bucket. The slosh of water sounded like a gunshot in the silence. She started in the corner, keeping her eyes on the floor. The concrete was stained with something dark and dry. She scrubbed harder. 10 credits, Elsa muttered to herself, her nervous tick taking over. 10 credits buys a nutrient bar. Maybe chocolate flavor, probably chalk flavor. I hate this place. I hate Merrick. I hate concrete. She worked her way closer to the center, closer to him. Sylas shifted. The sound of the chains rattling was low, heavy. Elsa froze. She kept her head down, scrubbing the same spot until the stone was raw. A low vibration started in the air. It wasn't a sound, it was a feeling. It rattled her teeth. It was a growl, deep and primal, coming from the chest of the man chained before her. Elsa looked up. Sylas had lifted his head. His eyes were glowing, literally glowing, a burning electric violet in the dark. He bared his teeth, razor-sharp canines that were definitely not human. He lunged forward, the chains snapping taut just inches from her face. Most people would have screamed. Most people would have died of a heart attack right there. Elsa was tired, she was hungry, and she had just spent 10 minutes scrubbing that specific spot. Without thinking, she lifted her wet, soapy rag and smacked him right on the nose. Thwack. "Hey," Elsa snapped. "I just sanitized that. Do you have any idea how hard it is to get drool out of porous concrete?" The growl cut off instantly. The silence that followed was absolute. Sylas blinked. He looked at the rag, then at her. He seemed confused. Elsa realized what she had done. Panic flooded her veins, but her mouth, as usual, kept moving. "Don't look at me like that," she hissed, pointing a shaking finger at him. "You're making a mess. Sit your massive ego down before I get the spray bottle." Outside, in the surveillance room, the guards gasped. Inside Zero Cell, Sylas Vane, the destroyer of worlds, the Primordial Alpha, stared at the tiny, trembling woman in the gray jumpsuit. A slow, terrifying smirk spread across his face. It cracked the mask of his rage. He moved. The chains groaned as he shifted his weight. He didn't tear her throat out. Instead, he dropped to his knees, lowering himself until his glowing violet eyes were level with hers. "Make me," he rasped. His voice sounded like gravel grinding on velvet. It was unused, hoarse, and dark. Elsa stared at him, her heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. She held her mop like a spear. I will, she squeaked. I have disinfectant. Chapter 3. The Handler. Elsa didn't remember leaving the cell. One minute she was threatening a demigod with bleach, the next she was leaning against the cold metal of the corridor wall, hyperventilating. The guards were staring at her, not with disgust this time, but with bewilderment. "You're alive," the mech suit god said. He sounded disappointed. "Barely," Elsa wheezed. He talked." "He talked?" The guard stiffened. "Vane hasn't spoken a word since the siege of Sector 7. What did he say?" Elsa flushed. She couldn't tell them. He said, "Nothing important," just mumbled. She grabbed her cart and fled. That night she couldn't sleep. She lay in her bunk in the maintenance crawl space she called a room, staring at the rusted pipes above her head. She could still feel the vibration of his voice in her bones. "Make me." It wasn't a threat. It was a challenge. It was amusement. The next morning she was summoned to Merrick's office again. "You survived," Merrick said, looking at the security footage on his screen. He paused the video right at the moment Elsa smacked Sylas with the rag. He zoomed in. "Fascinating." "I apologize, sir," Elsa said quickly. "It was a reflex. I know we aren't supposed to touch the prisoners. I'll take the deduction from my pay." "Deduction?" Merrick swiveled his chair. "Krell, do you know how many handlers Vane has killed? 12. He rips them apart psychically before they even open the door. But you treated him like a bad dog." Merrick tapped the desk. "His vitals changed. When you were in there, his cortisol levels dropped, his energy output stabilized. You have a calming effect on the asset." "I'm a Null, sir. I don't project fear. Or maybe you're just too stupid to be afraid. Either way, you have a new job." He typed something into his console. Elsa's wrist comp buzzed. "Rank update. Handler. Probationary. New daily wage, 18 credits." 18? Elsa stared at him. "Sir, handlers usually get 50. You have no training and no qualifications." Merrick smiled thinly. "Take it, or go back to scrubbing the incinerator." "I'll take it," Elsa gritted out. "Good, you start now. He's refusing the nutritional paste. Get him to eat. If he dies of starvation, I'll add his replacement cost to your debt." Chapter 4. The Silence. Elsa stood outside Cell 0 with a tray of nutrient loaf, a brown brick-like substance that smelled of yeast and despair. "Okay," she whispered to herself. "Just go in, put the food down, leave. Don't hit him." She swiped her card. The door opened. Sylas was exactly where she had left him, kneeling in the center of the room. But this time, he wasn't looking at the floor. He was looking at the door. His violet eyes locked onto hers the moment she stepped inside. Elsa walked in, the door sealing behind her. The darkness seemed less heavy today, or maybe she was just getting used to the terror. "Lunch," she announced, her voice echoing in the cavern. She walked to the safe line, a yellow stripe painted on the floor 10 feet from his reach, and set the tray down. She slid it across the floor toward him. Sylas didn't look at the food. He watched her. His gaze was physical, a weight on her skin. "You have to eat it," Elsa said, crossing her arms. "If you starve, Merrick charges me for it, and I really can't afford a 1,000,000,000 credit surcharge." Sylas tilted his head. He remained silent. "Oh, so we're doing the silent treatment now," Elsa said, her nervousness making her ramble. "Yesterday you were all make me and spooky voices. Now you're a mime?" She sighed and sat down on the floor on her side of the yellow line. She knew she should leave, but her legs were tired, and frankly, this was the only room in the prison where the guards couldn't stare at her. "Look," she said, picking out a loose thread on her jumpsuit. "I know the food sucks, it tastes like wet cardboard, but it keeps you alive, and I need this job." Sylas moved. He reached out a hand, his fingers long, tipped with black claws, and crushed the nutrient brick into dust in his fist. "Okay," Elsa winced. "Statement made, you don't like the loaf." She reached into her pocket. She pulled out a small, wrapped package. It was a sandwich, stolen from the staff break room during the camera blind spot cycle. Real bread, a slice of synthetic ham. "I was going to eat this," she said mournfully, "but you look like you need it more." She slid the sandwich across the floor. Sylas stared at the sandwich. Then he looked at her. For a moment, the violet glow in his eyes softened to a deep lavender. He picked up the sandwich. He didn't crush it. He took a bite, his eyes never leaving her face. "You're welcome," Elsa muttered. "Don't get used to it. I steal slowly."
Chapter 5. The First Lesson. A week passed. Elsa fell into a bizarre routine. Every day at 0800 and 1800, she entered cell 0. She brought food, sometimes smuggled real food, sometimes the loaf. She cleaned the cell while he sat there, watching her, and she talked. God, she talked. "The warden got a new haircut today," she told him while scrubbing the corner. "He looks like a shaved rat. I almost laughed in his face." Sylas listened. He sat perfectly still, like a predator waiting for prey, but he listened. Sometimes when she made a particularly biting comment about the guards, the corner of his mouth would twitch. He was learning her. He was learning that she was terrified, but she hid it behind sarcasm. He was learning that she was poor, debt-ridden, and alone. One evening, Elsa came in with a bruise on her cheek. She didn't mention it. She just set the tray down and started cleaning silently. She didn't sass him. She didn't complain about the damp. She just worked, flinching every time the bucket clattered. Sylas didn't eat. He sat there, the air around him growing colder, denser. "Who?" he asked. The single word cracked the air. Elsa jumped. She looked at him. "What?" "Who touched you?" Sylas's voice was low, vibrating with a rage that made the chains rattle against the wall. Elsa froze. "Excuse me? I am not yours. I am an employee of the Acheron Vault." "You feed me," Sylas said simply. "You enter my den. You are my handler. By the laws of the pack, you are under my protection." "You're in a cage, Sylas," Elsa pointed out gently. "You can't protect anyone." Sylas smirked. It was a dark, dangerous expression that made Elsa's breath hitch. "Come closer," he said. "No." "Closer, little scrubber. I will not hurt you." Elsa hesitated, then stepped to the yellow line. "The guard," Sylas said softly. "He relies on his sight. He watches you. Next time he approaches, do not look away. Stare at his throat. Visualize your teeth in his windpipe." I don't have claws like you." "You don't need claws," Sylas whispered. "You are an omega. You have instincts you have buried under fear. Project the intent to kill. He is a beta cur. He will smell the predator on you." "And where am I getting this predator smell from?" Elsa asked skeptically. Sylas leaned forward as far as the chains allowed, inhaling deeply, smelling the air between them. "From me," he said. Elsa felt a shiver run down her spine that had nothing to do with fear. The next day, when the red stripe guard cornered her, she didn't look down. She looked at his throat. She imagined Sylas's violet eyes. She imagined the snap of teeth. The guard stopped. He blinked, looking unsettled. He took a step back, his hand wavering away from his baton. "Freak," he muttered, and walked away. Elsa stood there, stunned. She looked at her hands. They weren't shaking. She went to cell 0 that night with an extra sandwich. "It worked," she told him. Sylas took the food, his fingers brushing hers for the first time. His skin was burning hot. "Good girl," he rumbled. "Now sit. Tell me about the rat-haired warden." Chapter 6. The Battery. The Acheron Vault was built on secrets, but it was surprisingly terrible at keeping them. Elsa was scrubbing the floor of Lab 4, a restricted zone usually off-limits to Null-class staff. However, a thermal pipe had burst, spraying hydraulic fluid everywhere, and the regular maintenance crew was unavailable, which in prison speak usually meant they were dead or drunk.
Clean it all, Krell, the supervising scientist, Dr. Eris, had snapped before leaving for his lunch break. Don't touch the equipment. Elsa was currently under a massive server bank, wiping up oily blue sludge. It was quiet here, save for the hum of the cooling fans. As she reached for a rag, her hand brushed against something hard under the desk. It was a data pod. Dr. Eris must have dropped it. Elsa knew she should leave it. Touching it was a crime punishable by immediate contract termination and possibly being thrown into the feral pits. But curiosity was a disease, and Elsa was terminal. She wiped her grease-stained fingers on her jumpsuit and tapped the screen. It wasn't locked. Project Siphon. Subject 0. Sylas Vane. Status critical. Elsa frowned. She swiped to the next page. It wasn't a prisoner file, it was an energy schematic. The graphic showed the Acheron Vault at the bottom and the gleaming city of Orym above. Thick red lines pulsed from the prison cells, traveling up massive conduits to the city. Energy output 94%. Source, biological alpha essence. Notes, subject 0 is reaching depletion. Warning, subject requires a biological ground for excess energy. Null class interaction recommended for stabilization. Final extraction scheduled for 72 hours. Elsa felt the blood drain from her face. The vault wasn't a prison, it was a battery. They weren't keeping the monsters locked up to protect society, they were harvesting them. They were draining the alphas dry to keep the lights on in the rich districts. And Sylas? Depression, she whispered. She scrolled to the medical attachment. Subject shows signs of core instability. If extraction continues, catastrophic organ failure is imminent. They were killing him, not quickly, not mercifully, but slowly, draining his life force until he was nothing but a husk. A door swooshed open down the hall. Footsteps clicked on the tile. Elsa shoved the data pad deep into her utility pocket, right next to her spray bottle. She grabbed her mop and started scrubbing frantically, her heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. "You there, scrubber!" It was Dr. Eris. He looked panicked. "Did you see a pad? I left it here." Elsa looked up, widening her eyes into the most vacant, dull expression she could muster. "A pad, sir? Like, for absorption?" Eris looked at her with utter disdain. "A computer, you idiot! A black slate!" "Oh," Elsa said, pointing to the trash compactor chute on the wall. "I swept some trash into the chute, sir. Maybe it fell." Eris cursed violently and ran toward the chute. Elsa didn't wait. She grabbed her cart and walked out, her knees shaking. She had the proof, and she had a deadline, 72 hours before the man who taught her to snarl was turned into a AA battery. She needed to get to Cell 0. Chapter 7. The Nuclear Reactor. Elsa practically vibrated with nervous energy as she entered Cell 0 that evening. She checked the corridor 3 times to make sure the guards weren't watching the monitor closely. They usually ignored her shifts now. Watching a girl mop for an hour was boring reality TV. She swiped her card and the blast doors hissed open. Sylas was waiting. He was always waiting now. He sat in the center of the darkness, his violet eyes tracking her movement instantly. "You reek of fear," he rumbled. It wasn't an insult, it was an observation. "And hydraulic fluid." "I had a busy day," Elsa snapped, ditching the mop bucket. She walked straight to the yellow line and sat down hard. She pulled the stolen data pad from her pocket and slid it across the floor to him. "Read it." Sylas looked at the device. He didn't touch it. "I know what it says, Elsa." "You know?" Elsa's voice went up an octave. "You know they're turning you into a disposable battery for the penthouse suites uptown? You know you're scheduled for final extraction in 3 days." "Yes." "And you're just sitting here." Elsa waved her hands at the chains. "Why aren't you raging? Why aren't you tearing the walls down?" "Because the walls are reinforced with dampening fields," Sylas said calmly. "And because, until recently, I did not care." He picked up the pad with 2 claws, glancing at the red graphs. "I am a primordial little scrubber. My energy is not like yours. It is vast. They have been feeding on me for 10 years. It is tiresome." "Tiresome?"
Elsa stared at him. You're dying, Sylas. Catastrophic organ failure. That sounds a lot worse than tiresome. That sounds permanent. Sylas looked up, his gaze intense. Why do you care? If I die, your job becomes easier. You won't have to smuggle sandwiches. I care because it's wrong. Elsa stood up, pacing the small space she allowed herself. I care because you're a person, not a power plant. And because you're the only one in this hellhole who actually listens to me. She stopped pacing and looked at him. We have to do something. You have to fight. I am tired of fighting, Sylas said softly. He leaned back against the wall, the chains clinking. The world outside is just another cage. Why should I break this one? Because I'm in the outside cage, Elsa said, her voice small, and I hate it there. But at least there's sky. Have you seen the sky lately? Sylas went still. He looked at her, really looked at her, as if measuring the weight of her soul. No, he admitted, I have not. It's gray, mostly, Elsa babbled, trying to hide her tears. But sometimes, at sunset, it turns this weird purple color, like your eyes. It's pretty. Sylas shifted. He extended his hand, palm up, straining against the manacle. It was an invitation. Elsa hesitated, then stepped over the yellow line. She placed her small, rough hand in his massive, scarred palm. His skin was burning hot, humming with contained power. If I break this cage, Sylas whispered, his thumb brushing her wrist, I will burn the city down. All of it. Good. The rent is too high anyway. Sylas smirked. It was the most dangerous thing she had ever seen.
Chapter 8. The Ultimatum. The next morning, the hammer dropped. Elsa was summoned to Warden Merrick's office. She expected a reprimand for the stolen datapad, but when she entered, Merrick wasn't looking at a screen. He was looking at a contract. Krell, Merrick said, not offering her a seat. We've had a recalculation of your life debt. Elsa gripped the fabric of her jumpsuit. Recalculation? Sir, I've paid off 300 credits this month. I'm on schedule. Interest rates, Merrick smiled, showing too many teeth. Variable adjustment. Also, there's a fee for the increased water usage in your sector. You're down another 50,000. Elsa felt like she'd been punched in the gut. That's impossible. You're just making numbers up. I am the law in this facility, Krell, Merrick said coldly. But I have a solution, a way to wipe your debt entirely. He slid a paper across the desk. It was a transfer order. Destination? The Feral Breeding Program. Elsa read the words and bile rose in her throat. Null-class omegas were rare. They were valuable for breeding because they could survive the process with aggressive alphas. No, Elsa whispered. I won't do it. You don't have a choice, Merrick said, standing up, unless you help us with Project Siphon. Elsa froze. What? Subject 0, Merrick said, walking around the desk. He's resisting the final extraction protocols. His energy spikes are erratic. He's fighting the drain. But he listens to you. You've domesticated him. Merrick leaned in, invading her personal space. He smelled of mint and rot. Tomorrow night, we begin the procedure. I want you in the room. I want you to hold his hand, stroke his hair, whatever you do to keep him calm. Keep him docile while we hook him up to the core. If he stays quiet until he expires, I clear your debt. Elsa stared at him. He wanted her to be the Judas goat. He wanted her to lead Sylas to the slaughterhouse and keep him calm while they bled him dry. And if I refuse? Elsa asked, her voice trembling. Then you go to the breeding pits immediately, Merrick shrugged, and we extract 0 the hard way. He suffers more, you suffer more, everyone loses. Elsa looked at the transfer order. Then she looked at Merrick. She summoned the memory of Sylas's voice. Visualize your teeth in his windpipe. I'll do it, Elsa lied. I'll keep him calm. Merrick smiled. Good girl. Tomorrow night, 2200 hours. Don't be late. Elsa walked out of the office. She didn't go to her room. She didn't go to the cafeteria. She went to the supply closet and grabbed her backpack. She had 36 hours. She didn't have a plan, she didn't have a weapon, and she didn't have a prayer. But she had a bobby pin, a stolen datapad, and a feral alpha who had promised to burn the city down for her. It was time to collect on that promise.
Chapter 9. The Toolkit. Breaking into a high-security prison cell required high-tech gear, laser cutters, code breakers, plasma charges. Elsa had a bent spoon, a multi-tool she'd found in a drain, and a packet of powdered chili pepper she'd been saving for a special occasion. She sat in her crawlspace organizing her inventory on the floor. Okay, she muttered to herself. Step 1, get past the blast door. I have the key card, but Merrick might lock me out before the shift. Step 2, the chains. They're maglocked. Step 3, the army of guards with guns. She looked at her wrist comp. 20 hours until final extraction. She needed help. She needed the only other person in this prison who hated the system as much as she did. Benny. Benny was the cook's assistant. He was a beta, missing an eye, and he ran the prison's black market on cigarettes and synth chocolate. Elsa found him behind the loading dock, smoking a vapor stick. "Elsa," Benny grunted, "you look like you're about to rob a bank." "Better," Elsa whispered. "I'm cashing out." "You're running," Benny shook his head. "You won't make it past the perimeter drones. I need a mag key. A universal unlocker for heavy restraints." Benny choked on his smoke. Heavy restraints? Like ship anchors or prisoner cuffs? "Cell 0 cuffs," Elsa said evenly. Benny stared at her with his one good eye. He looked terrified. Then, slowly, he reached into his apron. "You're insane," Benny hissed. "You're a dead woman walking." "I'm dead anyway, Benny. Merrick is sending me to the pits." Benny winced. Everyone knew about the pits. He sighed and pulled out a small, rusty device that looked like a garage door opener. "It's a master override. I stole it from a drunk guard last month. It barely holds a charge. It might work once, maybe twice." Elsa grabbed it like it was gold. "How much?" "Free," Benny said, turning away. "Just, if you let that thing out, tell him to eat Merrick first." "Deal," Elsa said. She spent the rest of the day acting normal. She cleaned the hallways, she scrubbed the toilets, she bowed her head to the guards. She was a ghost, a shadow, a nothing. But inside, she was screaming. She packed her backpack, 2 bottles of water, the override key, the datapad, and her last sandwich. At 1900 hours, 3 hours before her shift was supposed to start, she slipped into the ventilation shaft on level 4. It was tight, smelling of dust and recycled air, but it bypassed the main security checkpoint for the dungeon level. She crawled for 40 minutes, her knees scraping against the metal. She dropped down into the maintenance closet, right next to cell 0. She peeked out. The elite guards were there. 2 of them, mech suits, big guns. Elsa gripped the packet of chili powder. It wasn't a weapon, it was a distraction. She waited until the ventilation cycle kicked in, a loud thrum that vibrated the walls. She popped the grate, threw a metal bolt down the hallway to the left, and waited. Clang. "What was that?" Guard 1 asked. "Check it out," Guard 2 ordered. Guard 1 lumbered away. Guard 2 turned his back to the closet, watching the monitor. Elsa slipped out. She didn't attack him. She was 5'0" and weighed as much as a wet towel. She sprinted to the blast door console, swiped her card, and prayed. Green light. The door hissed open. Guard 2 spun around. "Hey, halt!" Elsa dove inside the cell and slapped the close button on the interior panel. The blast door slammed shut, just as a plasma bolt scorched the metal frame. She was in. Chapter 10. The Release. The cell was pitch black, as always, but the silence was different. It was charged, electric. "You are early," Sylas's voice rumbled from the dark, "and you are breathing like a hunted rabbit."
Elsa didn't waste time with banter. She clicked her flashlight on and ran toward him. "We're leaving," she panted. "Tonight, right now." Sylas watched her approach. He saw the sweat on her forehead, the wild look in her eyes, the rusty device in her hand. "They locked the door behind me," Elsa said, dropping to her knees beside him, "which means we have about 5 minutes before they override it and come in here with a squad." She jammed the mag key into the port on his left wrist shackle. "Elsa," Sylas said, his voice strangely calm. "Stop." "I can't stop," she snapped, jiggling the device. "Come on, you piece of junk." She jammed the mag key into the port. The device beeped, and the red light on the cuffs turned green. A low hum died down. "The dampeners are down," Elsa breathed. Sylas smirked. "Good." He pulled his hands apart. With the energy field gone, the metal didn't just break, it disintegrated. There was a sound of energy shattering. Sylas looked down at Elsa. He extended a hand. "Are you ready, El?" For the first time, Elsa saw him at his full height. He was massive, towering over 7 feet tall. The shadows in the room seemed to cling to him, wrapping around his body like a cloak. The scars on his chest glowed with the same violet light as his eyes. He stretched, his joints popping with the sound of gunshots. He looked at the blast door, which was currently being pounded on from the outside. Thud, thud. "Open up!" the guards screamed. "Vent the gas! Kill them both!" Sylas looked down at Elsa. He extended a hand. "Are you ready, El?" Elsa looked at his hand. Then she looked at the door that was starting to buckle under the assault of a plasma cutter. She stood up. She grabbed his hand. "If you eat me, I will haunt you forever." Sylas laughed. It was a terrifying, beautiful sound. "Deal." He turned to the door. He didn't raise a fist, he just opened his mouth and let out a roar that wasn't human. It was pure acoustic force. The blast door, 5 inches of reinforced steel, didn't just open, it was blown off its hinges. It flew down the corridor, taking the 2 guards with it. Sylas stepped out of the cell, pulling Elsa behind him. "Now," he growled, the hallway lights flickering and exploding as he passed. "Let's go see the Warden." Chapter 11. The Walk. The corridor outside Cell 0 was a ruin. The blast door was embedded in the far wall, crumpled like a piece of tin foil. The 2 guards were unconscious, their armor fused by the heat of Sylas's roar. Elsa stepped out, her boots crunching on broken glass. The air smelled of ozone and melted plastic. "Stay close," Sylas murmured. He didn't look back at her. He was scanning the hallway, his head tilting as if listening to music only he could hear. "They are coming. 3 squads, tactical gear." "We should run," Elsa whispered, clutching the straps of her backpack. "The service elevator is down the hall. We can bypass the main lobby." "No," Sylas said. He started walking, not running, walking. His stride was long and unhurried, the movement of a king touring his kingdom, not a prisoner escaping it. "We are not hiding in the vents anymore, Elsa. We are leaving through the front door." "That's the stupidest thing I've ever heard," Elsa hissed, jogging to keep up with him. "There are turrets, there are drones. You might be a god monster, but I am very squishy." Sylas glanced down at her, a flicker of amusement in his dark gaze. "Squishy. I will remember that." They turned the corner and ran straight into the first squad. 5 guards, fully armored, rifles raised. "Target acquired," the lead guard screamed. "Open fire." Elsa flinched, instinctively curling into a ball, but the bullets never touched her. Sylas didn't dodge. He simply raised his left hand. The air in the corridor seemed to solidify. It turned purple and thick, like gelatin. The bullets hit the invisible barrier and stopped dead, suspended in midair, spinning lazily. The guards froze. Sylas flicked his wrist. The bullets reversed direction. They didn't hit the guards. Sylas wasn't messy, but they smashed into the guards' rifles, shattering the weapons in their hands. The force knocked the men backward, sending them skidding across the polished floor. "Move," Sylas ordered. Elsa stared at the groaning guards, then at Sylas's broad back. She scrambled after him. You could have done that the whole time, she demanded, her voice rising in pitch. When I was mopping, when Merrick was threatening me, you could have just waved your hand? I told you, Sylas said, stepping over a fallen guard without looking down. I was waiting. For what? For me to bring you a sandwich? Sylas stopped. He turned, pinning her with that intense, glowing gaze. The alarm klaxons bathed him in rotating red light, making his scars look like fresh wounds. For you to ask, he said simply. Power without direction is chaos, Elsa. You gave me direction. He turned back around. Now, direct me. Which way to the armory? You need a weapon. Elsa swallowed hard. She pointed a shaking finger to the left. Level 3, Sector B. Chapter 12. The Armory. The door to the Sector B armory was locked with a biometric scanner. Sylas didn't have a fingerprint on file. He did, however, have a fist. He punched the control panel. Sparks showered down, the lock shorted, and he ripped the metal door open with a screech of tearing steel. Elsa slipped inside. It was a candy store for violence. Racks of pulse rifles, stun batons, and shock grenades lined the walls. Take what you can carry, Sylas said, leaning against the doorframe to keep watch. He looked bored. The chaos outside, the screaming alarms, the shouting, didn't seem to faze him. Elsa fastened a tactical belt around her waist. She was small, and the recoil of a pulse rifle would probably dislocate her shoulder. She opted for speed. She grabbed 2 stun batons, collapsible, high voltage, and clipped them to her waist. She filled her pockets with flashbang grenades. Stun batons? Sylas raised an eyebrow. You intend to tickle them? These put out 50,000 volts, Elsa snapped, testing one. It crackled with a vicious blue arc. And unlike you, I don't want to turn people into paste. I just want them to nap. Mercy, Sylas mused. A dangerous habit. It's not mercy, it's efficiency. Dead bodies cause paperwork. Unconscious ones just cause headaches. She grabbed a lightweight tactical vest and pulled it over her jumpsuit. It was too big, hanging loose on her frame, but it was better than nothing. I'm ready, she said, trying to sound braver than she felt. Sylas pushed off the doorframe. He walked over to her. He didn't grab a weapon. He reached out and adjusted the strap of her vest, tightening it so it actually protected her vitals. His knuckles grazed her collarbone, sending a jolt through her that was stronger than the stun baton. Stay behind me, he murmured. If they get close, use the stick. Do not hesitate. I won't, Elsa promised. Good. He turned to the hallway. We have company. A heavy mechanical thudding shook the floor. That's a riot droid, Elsa whispered, recognizing the sound. Heavy armor, minigun arm. We can't fight that in a hallway. We are not fighting it, Sylas said, cracking his neck. I am dismantling it. He stepped out. The droid, a hulking mass of black chrome, spun its Gatling gun. Brrrr. The noise was deafening. Elsa covered her ears, crouching in the armory doorway. Sylas moved like smoke. He didn't block the bullets this time. He dodged them, moving faster than the eye could track. He closed the distance in a heartbeat, sliding under the gun barrel. He grabbed the droid's leg and pulled. The 10-ton machine flipped into the air. Before it hit the ground, Sylas drove his fist into its central processor. The machine convulsed and died. Elsa peeked out. Sylas was standing on top of the smoking scrap metal. Next, he said. Chapter 13. The Kitchen. We have to go through the kitchens, Elsa said as they moved to level 2. Why? Sylas asked. The main lift is faster. Because Benny is there, Elsa said. He helped me get the mag key. If they find out, Merrick will throw him in the pits. I have to warn him. Sylas stopped. He looked at her, his expression unreadable. You risk our escape for a cook? He's my friend, Elsa said stubbornly. He gave me extra rations when I was broke. I'm not leaving him. Sylas stared at her for a long second. Then he nodded. Lead the way. They burst into the industrial kitchen. It was empty of staff except for one man hiding under a stainless steel prep table. Benny, Elsa hissed. Benny peeked out. His one good eye widened when he saw Elsa, and then nearly popped out of his head when he saw the 7-foot nightmare standing behind her. Sweet mother of... Benny scrambled back, knocking over a stack of pans. You let it out! You actually let it out! His name is Sylas, Elsa said, running over to help him up. And he's not an it. Benny, you have to hide. Merrick knows the key came from somewhere. Go to the dry storage, lock yourself in, pretend you've been there all shift. Benny was shaking. He looked at Sylas, who was looming over the prep table, sniffing a pot of boiling soup with a look of disgust. He's going to kill us all, Benny said. Only the bad ones, Elsa promised. Go, now. Benny nodded frantically and bolted toward the pantry. Sylas watched him go. He dipped a claw into the soup pot, tasted it, and grimaced. Needs salt. Focus, please, Elsa said, grabbing his arm. It was like grabbing a tree branch. Sylas looked down at her hand on his arm. He didn't pull away. You are loyal, he observed softly, to those who feed you. I'm loyal to people who treat me like a human being, Elsa corrected. Now come on, the exit is 2 levels up. Wait, Sylas said. He reached onto the counter and grabbed a massive butcher's knife. He held it out to her. You have a baton, take this too. Batteries fail, steel does not. Elsa looked at the knife. It was terrifying. She took it and shoved it into her belt. Fine, she said, but if I trip and stab myself, I'm blaming you. I will accept the blame. Let us go. The warden is getting impatient. I can smell his cologne from here. Chapter 14. The Warden's Trap. Attention, Subject 0 and Miss Krell. Merrick's voice boomed over the facility's PA system. It echoed off the metal walls of the stairwell they were climbing. It was calm, oily, and infuriating. I must admit, Merrick continued, his voice distorted by static. I am impressed. I expected the beast to kill you, Elsa. I didn't expect you to put it on a leash. Elsa froze on the stairs. Sylas growled, a low rumble that vibrated against her back. Keep moving, Sylas said. He is trying to stall us. You are heading for the east exit, Merrick's voice taunted. Predictable, but I'm afraid that door has been welded shut. In fact, all the exits are sealed. Protocol Omega. Elsa stopped. Protocol Omega seals the whole building. It pumps nerve gas into the corridors. Correct, Merrick said cheerfully. The gas is deploying in 3 minutes. However, I am a sporting man. The ventilation in the training arena is still active. If you want to breathe, come to the arena. Let's finish this properly. The intercom clicked off. A moment later, a hissing sound started from the vents above them. Green mist began to drift down. Gas! Elsa covered her mouth with her sleeve. He's hurting us. To the arena, Sylas said. His eyes were burning violet infernos. He wants a show. It's a trap, Sylas. The arena is a kill box. It's where they test the new weapon prototypes. I know, Sylas said. He turned and grabbed Elsa, lifting her easily into his arms. Hey, she squeaked. Hold your breath, he ordered. I can move faster than you. He didn't wait for an argument. He launched himself up the stairs, taking them 4 at a time. He moved with terrifying speed, a blur of motion through the rising green fog. Elsa buried her face in his chest, squeezing her eyes shut. She could hear his twin heartbeats thumping against her ear, slow, steady, powerful. He kicked open the door to level 1. The air here was still clear. He set her down gently. The arena is through those doors. He pointed to a massive set of double gates at the end of the hall. He's waiting for us, Elsa said, her hands shaking as she pulled out her stun baton. Let him wait, Sylas said. He leaned down, his face inches from hers. Elsa, listen to me. Whatever happens in there, do not leave my shadow. You are the anchor. If you break, I break. I won't break, Elsa said, though she felt like glass. Then let us give the warden his show. Chapter 15. The Arena Entrance. The double gates to the training arena were open. It was an invitation, a maw. Elsa and Sylas stepped through. The heavy doors slammed shut behind them instantly, the locks engaging with a deafening clang. Floodlights snapped on, blinding them for a second. The arena was massive, a circular coliseum of sand and steel, surrounded by high walls topped with electrified glass. Up in the observation booth, safe behind the glass, stood Warden Merrick. He was flanked by elite guards and scientists holding clipboards. "Welcome," Merrick's voice amplified through the stadium speakers. "The main event." Elsa squinted against the glare. The arena floor was empty, save for obstacles, concrete pillars, rusted tank traps. "Where are the guards?" Elsa whispered. "Where are the guns?" "No guards," Sylas said, his body tense. He sniffed the air, his lip curled back, baring his fangs. "Beasts." Merrick smiled down at them. "You see, Elsa, I told the board that Subject Zero was obsolete, that we needed to extract him to make way for the new generation. Gen-modified feral alphas. No humanity, just hunger. Don't worry, Elsa, they won't kill him. They are trained to maim. Once he is crippled and bleeding, we will drag him back to the siphon." 3 massive gates on the opposite side of the arena began to rise. From the darkness, a sound emerged that made Elsa's blood turn to ice. It wasn't a growl, it was a wet, chittering snarl. 3 creatures stepped into the light. They looked like wolves, but wrong. They were the size of horses, their fur patchy and matted with slime. Their muscles bulged unnaturally, tearing through their skin. Their eyes were dead white, rolling in their skulls. "Project Fenris," Merrick announced. "They haven't been fed in a week." The beasts locked eyes on Elsa. They didn't care about Sylas. They smelled the prey. They smelled the Omega. Elsa backed up, hitting Sylas's chest. "They're huge," she whimpered. "They are abominations," Sylas snarled. He swayed slightly, his violet aura flickering. Stopping the bullets and tearing the blast door had cost him. He was running on fumes. He stepped in front of her, shielding her completely. He didn't shift, he didn't need to. He simply expanded his presence. The air in the arena grew heavy. The gravity seemed to increase. Sylas let out a roar, a challenge that shook the viewing glass above. Chapter 16. The Command. The 3 gen-modified ferals circled like sharks in 30 water. They moved with a twitchy, unnatural speed, their claws clicking rhythmically on the concrete floor of the arena. Elsa stood behind Sylas, her hand gripping the back of his tactical vest. She could feel the tremors running through his massive frame. It wasn't fear. Sylas didn't know fear. It was exhaustion. The 10 years of energy drainage combined with the exertion of the escape were finally taking their toll. He was a nuclear reactor running on fumes. "They are splitting up," Sylas rumbled, his voice wet with blood from a split lip. "They will attack simultaneously. I can take the 2 on the left. You must evade the 3rd. "Evade?" Elsa hissed, her stun baton crackling uselessly in her shaking hand. "Sylas, that thing weighs 400 pounds and has teeth the size of daggers. I can't evade it." "Then hide," Sylas snarled, his eyes flaring with violet light. He was preparing to die. She saw it in his stance. He was going to throw himself into the meat grinder to buy her a few seconds of life. High above, in the observation booth, Warden Merrick's voice laughed over the speakers. "Look at him, the Primordial Alpha, reduced to a bodyguard for a janitor. Finish them." The sonic emitters screamed again. The ferals lunged. But Elsa didn't hide. A sudden, cold clarity washed over her. It was the same feeling she had when she first entered Cell Zero with a mop bucket. The sheer absurdity of the situation burned away the panic. "No," Elsa said. She didn't step back. She stepped forward. She moved around Sylas, placing herself directly between the raging monster and the oncoming beasts. "Elsa!" Sylas roared, reaching for her. "Get back!" "Shut up, Sylas," she snapped, not looking at him. She locked eyes with the lead feral wolf, the alpha of this twisted pack. The beast froze. It was confused. Prey ran. Prey screamed. Prey didn't walk toward the teeth. It hesitated, its white eyes narrowing, saliva dripping from its jaws onto the sand.
Elsa stood her ground. She dropped the stun baton. It clattered loudly on the floor. She didn't need a weapon. She needed authority. She pointed a finger at the feral. Sit. The beast snarled, snapping its jaws. I said sit, Elsa screamed. Her voice wasn't deep, but it carried a frequency of absolute, unyielding command. It was the voice of a woman who had stared down a god in the dark and told him to mind his manners. The feral flinched. The conditioning drilled into it, the fear of authority, the memory of the shock color, warred with its hunger. Elsa turned her back on the beast, a suicidal move. She faced Sylas. He was frozen, his claws extended, staring at her in horror and awe. He was vibrating with lethal energy, ready to explode. You too, Elsa said, poking him hard in his bleeding chest. Look at me, Sylas. Stop trying to die. I didn't bust you out so you could become dog food. Elsa, his voice cracked. They will kill you. They are waiting for a sign of weakness, she whispered fiercely, grabbing the lapels of his vest and yanking him down to her level. If you panic, we die. If you rage, we die. You need to focus. Anchor yourself. To what? He breathed, his violet eyes wild. To me, she slapped him. Not hard, but enough to snap his focus. Sit, she commanded softly. Calm down. Let me handle this. The elite guards in the booth laughed. Merrick sneered, but Sylas didn't laugh. The fog of rage in his eyes cleared, replaced by a crystalline intensity. He looked at this tiny, fragile creature who commanded him like he was a puppy, and he submitted. Slowly, deliberately, the Primordial Alpha sank to his knees in the sand. He lowered his head, exposing his neck to her, the ultimate sign of trust. He placed his forehead against her stomach, wrapping his arms around her waist. Guide me, Elsera, he whispered, using the name he had given her in the dark. And then the world changed.
Chapter 17. The Conduit. The moment Sylas touched her, Elsa felt it. It wasn't just heat. It was like grabbing a live wire during a thunderstorm. A surge of power rushed from him, flooding into her veins. But it didn't hurt. It felt right. Sylas was a battery, raw and chaotic. Elsa, the Null, was the ground wire. She was the lens that focused the laser. Her vision turned white. She could feel the heartbeat of every living thing in the room. She felt the frantic hunger of the ferals behind her. She felt the cruel pulse of Merrick in the booth. And she felt Sylas, an ocean of ancient dark power, pouring himself into her. Hold them, Sylas whispered in her mind. Elsa turned back to the ferals. Her eyes, usually a dull brown, flared with blinding violet light. The lead feral yelped. It scrambled backward, its paws slipping in the sand. To the beast, the small woman was no longer prey. She had suddenly become a giant, a towering apex predator made of shadow and fire. Down, Elsa commanded. Her voice was amplified, echoing with psychic force that shattered the glass of the arena lights. The three ferals didn't just sit, they collapsed. They slammed their bellies into the sand, whining pitifully, covering their heads with their paws. The alpha pressure rolling off Elsa was crushing them, flattening their will to fight. Impossible! Merrick's voice shrieked over the speakers. She's a null! She can't conduct alpha energy. It should kill her. Elsa looked up at the observation booth. She saw Merrick pounding on the glass. Sylas, Elsa said, her voice echoing with two tones, her own and his, the glass. As you wish, Sylas rumbled against her stomach. He didn't move his body, but he pushed more power into her. Elsa gasped, arching her back as the energy surged. It was intoxicating. It was terrifying. She raised her hand toward the booth. Crack. The reinforced blast-proof glass of the observation deck developed a spiderweb fracture. Increased power to the dampeners! Kill them! No, Elsa whispered. She clenched her fist.
The glass exploded. Millions of shards rained down into the arena like diamonds. The force field generators shorted out, sparking and dying. The sonic emitters melted. Elsa swayed, the sudden expenditure of energy draining her. Her knees buckled. Sylas caught her before she hit the sand. He stood up, scooping her into his arms effortlessly. He looked down at her, his expression filled with a dark, possessive wonder. "You," he murmured, brushing a hair from her sweating forehead. "You are not a Null, El. You are a conduit." Elsa blinked, her vision returning to normal. "Is that a promotion?" "It is a revolution," Sylas said. He turned to the crumbled observation booth, where the guards were scrambling to recover from the blast. He didn't look at the cowering ferals. He walked toward the exit ramp that led up to the booth. "Where are we going?" Elsa mumbled, her head resting on his shoulder. "To resign your position and to close your account." Chapter 18. The Warden's End. The door to the observation booth had been blown off its hinges. Sylas stepped over the wreckage, carrying Elsa like she was a queen. The room was a mess of sparks and broken screens. The elite guards lay groaning on the floor, knocked unconscious by the psychic backlash of Elsa's scream. Only Warden Merrick was still standing. He was backed into a corner, holding a small stun pistol with trembling hands. His immaculate uniform was covered in dust, and his face was pale as death. "Stay back," Merrick shouted, his voice cracking. "I have backup coming. The military is on its way." Sylas didn't stop walking until he was 3 feet from the warden. He set Elsa down gently on a sturdy chair that had survived the blast. "Are you hurt?" Sylas asked her, ignoring the gun pointed at his chest. "I'm okay," Elsa said, her voice returning. She looked at Merrick. "Just tired." Sylas turned to Merrick. The playfulness was gone from his face. The curiosity was gone. There was only the cold, unyielding judgment of the void. "You kept me in a box for 10 years. You drained my blood. You starved me." "It was necessary," Merrick blubbered, the gun shaking violently. "For the city, for the greater good. You are a monster, a resource." "A resource," Sylas repeated. He reached out. Merrick fired. The stun bolt hit Sylas in the chest. Sylas didn't even blink. He grabbed the gun, crushing it in Merrick's hand. The warden screamed as his fingers broke. Sylas grabbed Merrick by the throat and lifted him off the ground. Merrick kicked and clawed, his eyes bulging. "Sylas," Elsa said. Sylas paused. He didn't drop Merrick, but he looked back at Elsa. "He threatened to send you to the pits. He owes a debt." "I know," Elsa said. She stood up, her legs shaky but holding. She walked over to where Sylas held the struggling man. She reached into Merrick's pocket and pulled out his datapad. She used his limp hand to thumb scan the lock. "What are you doing?" Sylas asked, intrigued. "Transferring funds, severance pay, plus interest, plus a nuisance fee." She tapped execute. The screen flashed green. "Done," she said, tossing the pad onto the floor. "My life debt is 0, and his personal account is empty." Merrick made a choking sound of despair. "Now," Elsa said, looking into Merrick's terrified eyes, "you can drop him." "Drop him?" Sylas asked. "Or drop him?" "We aren't murderers, Sylas. We're just leaving." Sylas looked disappointed, but he nodded. "As you command." He threw Merrick, not at the wall, but through the broken window, back down into the arena. Merrick landed in a pile of sand. He groaned, alive but broken. Then a low growl echoed from the shadows of the arena floor. The 3 feral beasts, recovering from the blast, lifted their heads. They were hungry, and the man who had tormented them with sonic collars was now lying in their pen. Merrick screamed as the shadows closed in. Elsa turned away. "Let's go." Sylas watched the scene below for a second longer, a grim satisfaction on his face. Then he turned to Elsa. "The exit is this way, the surface." Chapter 19. The Cold Outside. The final blast door to the surface wasn't guarded. The guards had fled when the arena exploded.
Sylas tore the heavy lock off with a casual flick of his wrist and pushed the door open. The wind hit them first. It was freezing, carrying the scent of pine and snow. It was sharp, clean, and utterly unlike the recycled, stale air of the Acheron Vault. Elsa stepped out. Her boots sank into white powder. Snow. She had seen pictures of it, but she had never touched it. It was night. The sky was a vast, endless canvas of stars, unblocked by the smog of the Undercity. A massive, broken moon hung low on the horizon. "It's cold," Elsa whispered, hugging her arms around herself. Her tactical vest offered little protection against the biting wind. "It is," Sylas agreed. He stepped out beside her. The cold didn't seem to bother him. He closed his eyes and inhaled deeply, filling his lungs with the first free air he had tasted in a decade. He looked wilder out here. The moonlight caught the sharp angles of his face, the scars on his chest, the untamed length of his hair. He didn't look like a prisoner anymore. He looked like a king reclaiming his territory. "We cannot stay here," he said, opening his eyes. "The perimeter drones will circle back soon, and you are freezing." He unzipped his tactical vest, which he had stolen from a guard 2 sizes larger than him, and wrapped it around Elsa's shoulders. It was warm from his body heat and smelled of ozone and musk. "What about you?" Elsa asked, her teeth chattering. "I burn hot," he murmured. "Come." He didn't wait for her to walk. He picked her up again, cradling her against his chest. Elsa didn't argue. She was exhausted, and his warmth was the only thing keeping her from collapsing. "Where do we go?" she asked, burying her face in his neck. "There's nothing out here but the wastelands." "Not nothing," Sylas said. He began to run. His speed was inhuman. He moved over the snowdrifts like a wolf, silent and swift. The wind whipped past them, but in his arms, Elsa felt safe. The prison, the concrete tomb that had been her entire life, receded into the distance, becoming just a dark blot on the landscape. "I know a place," Sylas told her over the sound of the wind. "From before, an old sanctuary. They will not find us there." Elsa looked back one last time at the Acheron Vault. She saw the smoke rising from the ventilation shafts. She thought of her mop bucket, her crawl space, her debt. "Good riddance," she whispered. Then she closed her eyes and let the rhythm of Sylas's running lull her into a doze. She was free. She was freezing, homeless, and being carried by a monster, but she was free. Chapter 20. The Sanctuary. Elsa woke up to the smell of wood smoke. She blinked, disoriented. She wasn't moving anymore. She was lying on something soft. Furs? She sat up. She was in a room, but not a sleek metal room. The walls were made of rough-hewn stone and timber. A fire cracked merrily in a stone hearth, casting a warm orange glow over the space. It was a ruin, she realized, part of the old-world architecture that dotted the wastelands. But someone had patched the roof, cleared the floor, and stocked it. "You are awake." Sylas was sitting by the fire. He had cleaned the blood off his face and arms. He was using a knife to sharpen a long stick, his movements precise and calm. "Where are we?" Elsa asked, her voice raspy. "A hunter's lodge," Sylas said. "My pack used it, long ago, before the city took us." He stood up and walked over to her. He knelt beside the pile of furs she was sleeping on. He looked different in the firelight, less terrifying, more human. "Here," he handed her a tin cup. "Water, heated." Elsa took it, drinking greedily. The warmth spread through her chest. "How long was I out?" "A few hours," Sylas said. "I checked the perimeter. We are alone. The snow is covering our tracks. They will not follow us here tonight." Elsa looked around the cozy space. "It's nice." "It is a ruin," Sylas corrected, "but it is ours." He reached out and touched her hand. His fingers were rough, calloused, but his touch was incredibly gentle. He traced the veins on the back of her hand. "The mark," Sylas whispered. Elsa looked down. On the back of her hand, where he was touching, a faint violet pattern was glowing beneath her skin. It looked like a fractal burn scar, pulsing in time with her heartbeat.
What is it? Elsa asked, pulling her hand back slightly. The conduit mark, Sylas said. When you channeled my energy, it changed you. You are not a null anymore, Elsa. What does that mean? It means, Sylas leaned in, his dark gaze locking onto hers, that you and I are bound. You carry a piece of the void now. Elsa looked at the mark, then at him. She should have been scared. This man had killed a dozen people today. He was a monster. But looking at him now, seeing the way he looked at her, like she was the only source of light in the world, she didn't feel fear. She felt a magnetic pull, a heat rising in her stomach that had nothing to do with the fire. Does it come off? She asked weakly. No, Sylas smirked. It is permanent, like the leash. He moved closer, invading her space. The heat radiating off him was intense. Elsa's breath hitched. You need to eat, he said, his voice dropping an octave. You are weak. I'm not hungry, Elsa lied. Her heart was pounding. Liar, Sylas whispered. He reached up and brushed his lower lip. You are starving. Elsa trembled. She wasn't sure if he was talking about food anymore. The air in the small cabin suddenly felt very thin and very, very hot.
Chapter 21. The Hunger. The fire crackled, popping loudly in the quiet cabin, but the sound was drowned out by the thrumming tension between them. Sylas hadn't moved. He was still kneeling beside the furs where Elsa lay, his hand hovering near her face, his thumb tracing the line of her lip. His violet eyes were dilated, swallowing the iris, leaving only a ring of glowing amethyst. He looked less like a man and more like a starving creature that had finally cornered its meal. You said you weren't hungry, Sylas whispered, his voice rougher than usual. But your heart is beating like a drum. I can hear it. I can smell the adrenaline in your blood. Elsa swallowed hard, her throat dry. That's fear. You're a giant, terrifying super soldier looming over me in a cabin in the middle of nowhere. Fear is a rational response. Is it? Sylas tilted his head. He leaned in closer, inhaling the scent at the hollow of her throat. You don't smell like fear, Elsa. You smell like ozone, like the storm before it breaks. He pulled back slightly, reaching for a small pack he had set near the fire. He pulled out a strip of dried meat, real meat, likely venison from the lodge's old stores. Eat, he commanded, holding it to her lips. Elsa hesitated, then took a bite. The flavor was intense, salty, smoky, rich. It was 1,000 times better than the gray sludge of the prison. She chewed slowly, watching him watch her. He tracked every movement of her jaw, every swallow. Why aren't you eating? Elsa asked, her voice small. I am feeding, Sylas murmured. Watching you keeps the madness at bay, for now. He sat back on his heels, but he didn't retreat. The air in the cabin was getting hotter. Elsa pulled the fur blanket tighter around her shoulders, but the heat wasn't coming from the air. It was coming from inside her skin. The violet mark on her hand was pulsing, sending waves of warmth up her arm and into her chest. The bond, Elsa said, looking at the glowing mark. It goes both ways, doesn't it? I felt your power in the arena. Do you feel me? I feel everything, Sylas admitted, his voice tight. I feel your confusion, your exhaustion, and... He stopped, his jaw clenching. And what? And your desire. Elsa flushed crimson. She tried to look away, but he caught her chin with his fingers, turning her face back to his. Do not hide from me. For 10 years I was cold. I was empty. Now I am burning, and you are the flint that struck the spark. He shifted, moving from a kneel to a crouch, looming over her. The space between them evaporated. Elsa could feel the heat radiating off his bare chest, the sheer mass of him blocking out the firelight. You told me to sit, he whispered, his eyes searching hers. You told me to be a good boy, but we are not in the prison anymore, Elsa. There are no cameras, there are no guards. He lowered his head, his lips brushing against the shell of her ear. Are you still the handler? He asked, his voice a low, vibrating growl against her skin. Elsa shivered violently. She realized with a jolt of clarity that he was testing the leash. He was pushing against the boundaries she had set, checking to see if she still held the power. She reached up, her hand trembling, and grabbed a handful of his long, dark hair. She didn't pull away. She pulled him down. "I'm not prey, and you're not done listening." Chapter 22. The Heat. Sylas froze as she gripped his hair. A low rumble started in his chest, a sound of pure, unadulterated need. "Then command me," he challenged, his breath hot against her neck. Elsa's heart hammered, but the instinct, the handler's instinct that had kept her alive in Cell 0, surged forward. She pushed against his chest, hard. "Lie back," she ordered. It was a gamble. He was a Primordial Alpha, a creature of dominance. But Sylas didn't fight her. He let out a shuddering breath and shifted, moving off her and lying back onto the furs. He looked up at her, his eyes glowing like dying stars, waiting. Elsa crawled over him. He was massive beneath her, a landscape of muscle and scars. She straddled his waist, settling her weight on him. The contact was electric. Through the thin fabric of her jumpsuit, she could feel the heat of his skin, the hardness of his body. "You're burning up," she whispered, placing her hands on his chest. His skin was fever hot. The alpha heat. She had heard rumors about it, a biological imperative triggered by the presence of a compatible mate. "It is the siphon, Elsa," Sylas gasped, his hands gripping her hips, his claws retracted but digging in possessively. "The energy, it has nowhere to go. It needs a release. You are the conduit, Elsa. You are the only thing that can take it." "Then let it go," Elsa said. She leaned down and kissed him. It wasn't a gentle kiss. It was a collision. Sylas groaned, a sound torn from the depths of his soul, and surged up to meet her. His mouth was hot, demanding, tasting of smoke and desperation. He kissed her like he was drowning, and she was oxygen. Elsa gasped as the psychic bond flared to life. It wasn't just physical sensation, it was a mental avalanche. She felt his decade of loneliness, his rage, his awe of her, and he felt her defiance, her hidden softness, her desire to be consumed. His hands moved up her back, tangling in her hair, pulling her closer until there was no air left between them. He flipped them over in one fluid motion, pinning her into the soft furs. He hovered above her, bracing his weight on his forearms, framing her face. "Mine," he growled against her lips. "You are mine. The city cannot have you. The Warden cannot have you. You belong to the void." "Shut up and kiss me, Sylas," Elsa breathed, wrapping her legs around his waist, pulling him down. He obliged. He kissed her throat, his teeth grazing the pulse point, making her arch off the furs. He stripped the tactical vest from her shoulders, his large hands roaming over her body with a reverence that bordered on worship. Every place he touched left a trail of fire. When skin finally met skin, the world seemed to dissolve. The violet mark on Elsa's hand began to glow brightly, and the scars on Sylas's chest answered, pulsing with the same light. "Elsa," he choked out, his forehead resting against hers, his eyes squeezed shut as he fought for control. "I don't know if I can be gentle. I have forgotten how." "I don't need gentle," Elsa whispered, running her hands down his scarred back, feeling the tension in his muscles. "I need you to be here, with me." Sylas shuddered. He looked at her one last time, an unspoken question in his eyes. Elsa answered by pulling him down to her. The heat consumed them. It was a physical and metaphysical merging, the alpha energy pouring into her, the conduit accepting it, cycling it back to him doubled. It was intense, overwhelming, and perfect. In the ruins of the old world, with the snowstorm howling outside, they burned together, forging a bond that iron chains never could. Chapter 23. The Morning After. Elsa woke to silence.
The fire had burned down to glowing embers. The cabin was dim, illuminated only by the faint morning light filtering through the cracks in the boarded window. She felt heavy, warm and sore in a way that made her blush. Sylas was asleep. It was a sight so rare she held her breath, afraid to break it. He was lying on his back, one arm thrown over his eyes, the other wrapped protectively around her waist, pinning her to his side. The tension that usually defined his face, the furrowed brow, the clenched jaw, was gone. He looked younger. Elsa carefully tried to shimmy out from under his arm. His grip tightened instantly. He didn't open his eyes. "Do not leave," he rumbled, his voice thick with sleep. "I need to pee," Elsa whispered. "Unless you want me to do that here, let me up." One violet eye cracked open. He smirked, a lazy, satisfied expression. "Fine, but come back." He released her. Elsa scrambled up, grabbing the fur blanket to wrap around her nakedness. The cold air of the cabin hit her skin, reminding her that they were still in the wastelands, still hunted. She walked to the heavy wooden door and cracked it open. The world outside was blindingly white. The storm had passed, leaving a blanket of pristine snow covering the ruins. It was beautiful, peaceful, and deadly silent. Elsa looked at her hand. The violet fractal mark was still there, but it had settled. It wasn't glowing anymore. It looked like an intricate tattoo woven into her skin. She stepped out into the snow, barefoot, testing the sensation. She felt different, lighter, yet anchored. She held up her hand toward a dead pine tree a few yards away. She remembered the feeling in the arena, the surge of power. She closed her eyes and reached for the tether in her mind that connected her to Sylas. It was there, a hum of energy in the back of her skull. She pulled on it just a little. Snap. Violet lightning crackled from her fingertips. It hit the tree. Boom! The tree didn't just break, it exploded. Splinters of wood showered the snow. The trunk was sheared in half as if hit by a cannonball. Elsa jumped back, staring at her hand in horror. "Holy—" "Impressive," a deep voice said from the doorway. She spun around. Sylas was leaning against the doorframe, wearing only his trousers. He didn't look horrified. He looked proud. "I barely touched it," Elsa stammered. I just pulled a little bit." "You are channeling a primordial," Sylas said, walking into the snow to join her. The cold didn't seem to touch him. He stood behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist, resting his chin on her head. "In this world," Sylas said, kissing the top of her head, "they are the same thing."
Chapter 24. The Signal. They spent the morning scavenging through the lodge. It had clearly been a safe house for someone important long ago. They found canned peaches, a cache of medical supplies, and, most importantly, a solar-powered radio transmitter. Elsa sat on the floor, tinkering with the radio wires, using her multi-tool. Sylas sat nearby, cleaning the pulse rifle they had stolen from the prison. "If I can get this frequency open," Elsa muttered, twisting a copper wire, "we might be able to intercept the city's patrol channels, see if they're tracking us." "They are tracking us," Sylas said without looking up. "Merrick is dead, but the board is not. I am the battery that powers their civilization. They will not let me go." "Optimism, Sylas. Try it sometime." Static hissed from the speaker. Then a voice cut through. "Sector 7, grid search negative. Staff evacuation complete. Kitchen personnel secured in holding." Elsa exhaled. Benny made it. "Deploying hunter-killer drones to the northern wastes. Thermal scans initiated." Elsa went pale. Northern wastes? That's here. "Priority 1, retrieve the asset. Priority 2, eliminate the handler. Extreme prejudice authorized." Sylas stopped cleaning the gun. The air in the cabin dropped 10 degrees. "Eliminate," he repeated softly. "They aren't trying to capture me anymore," Elsa said, her hands shaking. "They want me dead, so I can't control you." A high-pitched mechanical whine sounded outside. It was faint, barely audible over the wind, but Sylas heard it instantly. He was on his feet in a blur. "Get down." "What is it?" "Scout," Sylas snarled. He kicked the door open. Hovering just above the tree line, about 200 yards away, was a sleek black drone. It looked like a metallic hawk. A single red laser eye swept the ground. The laser hit the cabin. It locked onto Sylas in the doorway. "Target acquired." The mechanical voice echoed across the snow. Sylas didn't wait. He raised the pulse rifle and fired. He didn't aim, he just shot from the hip. The blue plasma bolt flew true, striking the drone in its central turbine. The machine exploded in a fireball, crashing into the trees. "Did you get it?" Elsa asked, running to the door. "I destroyed the scout," Sylas said, his face grim. "But it transmitted our coordinates before it died. The signal is out." He turned to her. The relaxed, lover-like demeanor of the morning was gone. The Alpha was back. "Pack your things," he ordered. "We have less than an hour before the heavy dropships arrive." "Run?" Elsa asked, grabbing her backpack. "Where do we run, Sylas? There's nothing north of here but ice." Sylas looked at the burning wreckage of the drone. He looked at the vast, empty horizon. "We do not run," he said darkly. "Running is for prey. We are going to find a place to fight."
Chapter 25. The King of the Wasteland. They left the cabin 10 minutes later. Sylas carried the heavy weapons. Elsa carried the supplies. They moved deeper into the mountains, climbing higher where the air was thin and the wind was vicious. "I saw it on the guard's tactical map before I killed him, the Iron Spire. It was a military outpost during the last war. It has defenses, cannons, shield generators." "Is it active?" Elsa asked, her breath fogging in the cold. "No, it has been dead for 50 years, but I can wake it up." He looked at her. "With you." "Me?" "You are the conduit," Sylas said. "You can jumpstart a fusion core with a touch. Together, we can turn that fortress back online. If we hold the spire, we control the high ground. Let them come to us." It was a desperate plan. It was a suicide mission, but it was better than freezing to death or being shot in the back. They reached the ridgeline just as the sun began to set. Far behind them, in the southern sky, Elsa saw them. 5 black dots on the horizon, heavy transport ships. The city had sent an army. "They really want you back," Elsa murmured. "They are desperate," Sylas said. "Without the siphon, the city lights are flickering. The heat is failing. Their paradise is crumbling." He turned to her, placing his heavy hands on her shoulders. "Elsa, this will not be a skirmish. This will be a war. If we go to the spire, there is no turning back. We fight until they stop coming, or until we die." Elsa looked at the oncoming ships. She thought about the life she had led, the scrubbing, the debt, the invisibility. She thought about the violet lightning she had called from her fingertips. She looked up at Sylas. He wasn't looking at her like a handler anymore. He was looking at her like a partner, like a queen. "I'm tired of running," Elsa said firmly, "and I'm tired of hiding in the dark." She reached up and touched his face, her thumb grazing his scar. The bond between them flared, warm and reassuring against the biting cold. "Take me to the spire," she commanded softly. "Let's show them what happens when the dog bites back." Sylas smirked, the expression fierce and proud. He grabbed her hand, interlacing their fingers. "As you command, Elsa." He turned toward the east, where a jagged black tower pierced the clouds like a spear. "Let us go wake the dead." Chapter 26. The Iron Spire. The Iron Spire was not a building. It was a tombstone for a dead war. Rising 1,000 feet into the darkening sky, the black metal tower stood stark against the white wasteland. It was jagged, covered in 50 years of ice and rust, looking more like a claw reaching from the earth than a military outpost.
Elsa and Sylas reached the massive blast doors at the base just as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the snow in hues of blood orange. "It's dead," Elsa whispered, placing her hand on the freezing metal. "There's no hum, no vibration. It's a husk." "It is sleeping," Sylas corrected. He looked over his shoulder. The 5 enemy dropships were closer now, their running lights visible in the twilight. They were maybe 10 minutes out. "We need to wake it up." Sylas didn't bother with the keypad. He jammed his fingers into the seam of the doors and pulled. His muscles strained, the veins in his neck bulging, glowing faintly with violet light. With a shriek of tearing rusted gears, the doors groaned open just enough for them to slip through. Inside, the air was stale and colder than the outside. Their footsteps echoed on the metal grating as they ran toward the central lift. "The core is at the top, the command deck. That is where the interface is." The elevator was dead. They had to climb. 30 flights of stairs. Elsa's lungs burned, her legs feeling like lead. She stumbled on the 20th landing, gasping for air. "I can't," she wheezed. "Sylas, I'm just a janitor. I don't have super soldier cardio." Sylas didn't offer sympathy, he offered strength. He scooped her up, holding her against his chest, and continued to run up the stairs 2 at a time. He didn't slow down. He didn't even pant. He was a machine driven by a singular purpose: survival. They burst onto the command deck. It was a circular room lined with dusty consoles and dead screens. In the center stood a massive glass pillar, the fusion drive. It was dark, lifeless. "Here," Sylas set her down. He walked to the pillar and placed his hand on the glass. "This station was designed to run on nuclear cells. We don't have those, but we have something better." He looked at Elsa. His eyes were burning with intensity. "You need to bridge the connection. Place your hands on the console. I will pour everything I have into you. You must direct it into the spire's grid." Elsa looked at the complex panel. "I don't know the codes. I don't know how to boot up a fortress." "You don't need codes," Sylas said, stepping behind her. He wrapped his arms around her waist, pressing his chest against her back. He grabbed her hands and placed them on the cold metal of the interface. "You just need to command it to wake up." "Like the dog?" Elsa whispered, trembling. "Like a god," Sylas corrected. "Ready yourself, Elsa. This is going to hurt." Chapter 27: The Awakening. The moment Sylas unleashed his power, Elsa felt like she had been struck by lightning. It wasn't like the arena. That had been a burst, a shout. This was a flood. Violet energy poured from Sylas into her spine. It filled her veins, burning away the cold, the fatigue, the fear. It was too much. She gasped, arching her back against him, her vision whitening out. "Focus," Sylas roared in her ear. "Don't let it scatter. Push it into the machine." Elsa gritted her teeth. She could feel the spire around her, a sleeping giant of wires and steel. She felt its cold, dead heart. "Wake up!" She didn't speak the words. She pushed them through her hands. The violet mark on her hand flared blindingly bright. The energy surged from her fingertips into the console. Thrum. A deep, resonant vibration shook the floor. The dust on the consoles danced. Inside the glass pillar, a spark of violet fire ignited. It swirled, grew, and then exploded into a roaring cyclone of energy. The lights on the command deck flickered on, not the harsh white of the old military, but a glowing, eerie purple. "System online," a mechanical voice droned, distorted by age. "Unauthorized biological interface detected. Override?" "Override confirmed," Elsa gasped, her voice echoing with the dual tone of the conduit. "Defense grid active." Outside, the ice coating the spire cracked and fell away as the hull heated up. Massive automated turrets, dormant for decades, whirred to life. Shield generators hummed, projecting a shimmering violet dome over the tower. They are here, Sylas said, looking at the radar screen. 5 red dots were closing in. Warning, the computer chimed. Hostile vessels detected. Engagement protocol. Elsa looked at the screen. She saw the ships that belonged to the people who had enslaved her, billed her for her own existence, and tried to turn Sylas into a battery. Protocol, Elsa whispered, her eyes glowing. Burn them all. Boom! The spire shuddered as the main cannons fired. Beams of coherent plasma cut through the night sky. The lead dropship didn't stand a chance. It was vaporized instantly, turning into a fireball that illuminated the snow for miles. One down, Sylas said, a savage grin spreading across his face. He pulled Elsa tighter against him. Hold the connection, Elsa. Feed the guns.
Chapter 29. The Alpha's Roar. The dreadnought loomed over the spire, blocking out the moon. Its main cannon glowed an angry, burning red. Target lock detected, the computer warned, calmly. Impact in 10 seconds. Elsa gripped the console. The shields wouldn't hold. Sylas was fighting for his life at the bottom of the hill, surrounded. If the spire fell, they both died. "Sylas!" she screamed across the mental bond. "Look up!" Down on the snow, Sylas paused, holding a soldier by the neck. He looked up. He saw the dreadnought. "I see it," his voice echoed in her head. "I cannot reach it." "We don't need to reach it," Elsa said, a desperate plan forming. "We need to break them, not the ship, the crew." "A psychic attack?" Sylas hesitated. "Elsa, the range. It will burn you out. It could kill you." "Do it," she screamed. "Channel it through me. Amplify it with the spire." Sylas didn't argue. He dropped the soldier. He fell to his knees in the snow, closing his eyes. Elsa slammed her hands onto the interface. "Computer, override all local frequencies. Broadcast on the dreadnought's command channel. Maximum gain." Linked. Elsa felt the surge coming. It wasn't energy this time. It was pure distilled dominance. It was the alpha essence of a creature that had hunted in the dark before humanity learned to build fires. Sylas poured his soul into the bond. Elsa caught it. She didn't just hold it, she magnified it. She pushed it through the spire's massive transmitters, aiming it directly at the dreadnought. She took a deep breath. She didn't scream, she commanded. Submit. The word didn't just come out of the speakers, it vibrated in the atoms of the air. It hit the dreadnought like a physical hammer. Inside the ship, the crew grabbed their heads, screaming. The pilot, overwhelmed by a primal biological terror deeper than thought, lost control. His hands went numb. He couldn't disobey the Alpha command. He dropped the controls and curled into a ball. The dreadnought pitched sideways. The main cannon fired, but the aim was wild. The beams sliced through the air, missing the command deck by inches, searing the night sky. The massive ship tilted, engines stalling as the crew succumbed to the psychic crush. It began to fall. It crashed into the ridge a mile away, a slow-motion catastrophe of twisting metal and fire. The shockwave blew the snow off the mountain. Down below, the remaining soldiers dropped their weapons. They fell to their knees, hands over their ears, weeping. The walkers shut down. Silence fell over the iron spire. Elsa stood trembling at the console. Her nose was bleeding. The violet mark on her hand was smoking. "Sylas?" she whispered. "I am here," came the ragged reply. "We won."
Chapter 30. The Crown. The sun rose over a battlefield that was strangely quiet. The wreckage of the dreadnought smoked in the distance. The surviving soldiers of the city's army had fled into the wastes, abandoning their gear. Elsa sat on the steps of the command deck, wrapped in a blanket she had found in an emergency locker. She was watching the sunrise. Heavy footsteps echoed on the stairs. Sylas appeared. He was covered in soot, oil, and blood. Some his, mostly not. His shirt was gone. He looked exhausted, battered, and absolutely magnificent. He walked over to her and sat down on the step below her, resting his head against her knee. "They're gone," he said, his voice rasping. "The city, the lights in the north have gone dark. They have no army left to send." "We broke them," Elsa whispered, running her hand through his matted hair. "The handler and the monster."
No. Sylas turned, looking up at her. His violet eyes were soft now, the fire banked down to glowing embers. The king and the queen. He reached up and took her hand, the one with the violet mark. He kissed the scar, his lips lingering on her skin. You commanded an army to kneel, he murmured, and they did. You are the Alpha now, Elsa. I don't want to be an Alpha, Elsa said, leaning down to rest her forehead against his. I just want to be warm. Sylas made a low noise in his throat. He stood up, pulling her with him. He didn't take her to the command chair. He took her to the small sleeping quarters adjacent to the deck. The cot was narrow and dusty, but it didn't matter. Sylas lay down, pulling her on top of him. The contact was instant relief. The bond between them settled into a steady, warm hum, no longer a raging river, but a deep ocean. The world will come for us eventually, Sylas said, his hands moving over her back, tracing the line of her spine. Scavengers, warlords, refugees looking for a leader. Let them come, Elsa whispered, kissing his throat. We have a fortress, we have big guns. And we have the leash, Sylas growled playfully, flipping her over so he hovered above her. The playfulness vanished quickly, replaced by the intense, consuming heat that lived between them. He kissed her, and it wasn't a desperate kiss of survival this time. It was a claiming. It was slow, deep, and thorough. His hands found skin beneath her oversized shirt. The friction of his calloused palms against her softness made her gasp. The violet light in the room dimmed, but the light from their bond flared, wrapping them in a cocoon of energy. You know, Elsa breathed, arching into his touch as he kissed the sensitive spot behind her ear. Technically, you outrank me now. You're the king of the wastelands. You don't have to listen to a janitor. Sylas stopped. He looked down at her, his expression fierce and completely open. He leaned his forehead against hers, their breaths mingling. I only listen to you, little scrubber, he whispered against her lips. You told me to sit. I'm sitting. Elsa smiled, wrapping her arms around his neck and pulling him down. Good boy, she whispered. Outside, the wind howled around the black tower, but inside, the fire burned bright, and for the first time in history, the Acheron Vault was empty and the monsters were free. The end.